Hey there! Before we dive in, just a quick favour to ask. If you're enjoying the show, don't be shellfish. Please take a moment to rate and review it wherever you're listening. It helps more people find us in the big blue ocean of podcasts. You can also support us by hitting that follow or subscribe button, following us on Instagram at Word on the Reef Podcast, and sharing the podcast link with a friend who might love it too. And if you'd like to help keep us afloat, please consider becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month over at patreon.com/wordonthereefpodcast. You'll get a shout out on the show, and your support helps cover the behind the scenes costs like hosting, editing software, and more. Thanks so much. Now let's get into today's episode. This is Word on the Reef, where marine science meets adventure. Join Tanya Murphy and Brett Goodban as we plunge into the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef and explore the mysteries beneath the waves. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Word on the Reef. I'm your host, diver and conservationist Tanya Murphy, and joining me as always is Cairns Aquarium's marine educator and fellow ocean enthusiast, Brett Goodban.
Good morning, everyone. Hey, Tanya. Episode 12.
Woohoo.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Feels good. Well, everyone who follows our show has heard quite a lot about the Great Barrier Reef by now. But Brett, have you ever heard of the Great Southern Reef?
Yeah, I have. And it's something not a lot of people recognise up this way, do they? They expect coral reefs to just be the reefs. But yeah, we've got that massive Great Southern Reef, yeah.
If you've ever been swimming or beach walking anywhere from Sydney all the way around to Perth, chances are you've been experiencing part of the Great Southern Reef without perhaps even realising. The Great Southern Reef is an 8,000 kilometre long network of temperate rocky reefs and kelp forests that stretches across Australia's southern coastline. It's a massive interconnected ecosystem, home to some of the most unique and spectacular marine life in the world. So, Brett, have you ever dived or snorkeled on the Great Southern Reef?
I have, well, on the West Coast, being born and bred in Fremantle and then growing up in Albany, I have done a lot of swimming and snorkelling over there, but I'm ashamed to say I haven't dived yet.
Yeah, well, I grew up in WA as well, but my whole diving career started, I did my dive course once I moved to Cairns, and so I also have only had a few experiences of diving and snorkelling on Rottnest Island and off Bustleton in Western Australia, nice. And it is mind-blowing. It's like a whole different world.
Yeah, it is, but it's cold water too. Yeah,
but it is cold, but if you've got the right wetsuit, it is just as full of life as the Great Barrier Reef. One of the coolest things I saw when I dived off Bustleton was wobbegong sharks. I mean, we have those on the Great Barrier Reef as well, but it seems like some of those things are more numerous in the colder water reefs. So yeah, safe to say it's a pretty incredible place full of amazing marine life, from giant cuttlefish to leafy sea dragons and playful seals. It's a way of life for millions of coastal-loving Aussies. It's worth more than $11.56 billion to our economy every year. But, like the Great Barrier Reef, it is under threat, especially from climate change. Rising ocean temperatures are devastating the kelp forests that so many species rely on. Outbreaks of kelp-eating sea urchins are spreading. And this summer, a marine heat wave with temperatures up to 2.5 degrees above average has triggered toxic algal blooms off the coast of Adelaide in South Australia, smothering more than 4,000 square kilometres of marine habitat. The images that have been coming through are shocking. Have you seen some of them, Brett?
Yeah, it's just devastating. It really is. It just shows you how far that warmer water's travelling, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's endangered fish, sharks, sea dragons, octopuses and cuttlefish being found washing ashore in scenes that resemble somewhat of a horror film. The locals have been told not to swim in the affected water or go fishing, and heartbreakingly, it's unfolding right now. It's still unfolding. It's been going on for a few weeks, and it's still happening right now. But there are things we can do to help. One of the organisations that's been doing incredible work raising awareness about the Great Southern Reef and finding solutions to the threats it's facing is the Great Southern Reef Foundation. So to guide us through the wonders of the Great Southern Reef and the threats it's facing, our guest today is Stefan Andrews, co-founder and Director of Education at the Great Southern Reef Foundation. Stefan is a marine biologist, filmmaker and educator from Adelaide in South Australia. He has also travelled the world contributing to reef research and videography. His films have been screened at film festivals around the world, and he's also an experienced high school teacher. Good morning, Stefan.
Good morning, Tanya, and hi, Brett. Thanks for
Hey,
having me on the
Stefan. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Great to have you on the show. Just quickly, though, before we dive further in, I just want to give a quick shout out to Nina from Belgium.
Hey, Nina.
Who's written us a lovely email.
Yeah.
If anyone else out there wants to get in touch with us, info@wordonthereef.com. You can send us your thoughts and feedback. And Nina from Belgium has requested a show about mollusks or shellfish.
Nice.
So that's a topic we haven't done a deep dive on yet.
No.
So thank you for that. That's a really good idea. I have a lot of questions about shellfish as well. We've obviously talked a bit about clams on the show, but there's things like the Triton conch shell, which has a really important part to play in the Great Barrier Reef ecosystem in terms of helping keep crown of thorns, sea stars under control. So I think the role of mollusks is probably can't be overstated or maybe is underappreciated. So thanks for that suggestion, Nina. We'll have a look around of what experts we can find.
Isn't that amazing that we're reaching Belgium?
Oh, it's
It
incredible.
just makes us so happy. Thank you.
Yeah, so who else is out there from different countries around the world?
See if you can shout out further away than Belgium. There's the challenge.
Send us an email. But now, Stefan, before we dive into the Great Southern Reef further, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your background? Because I know you've done a ton of interesting stuff.
Sure thing, Tanya. Yeah, I mean, I've always loved the ocean, and that's what motivated me to study marine science in Adelaide. And for me, the most exciting thing was getting in and under the water. So did lots of diving, worked as a scuba diving instructor for a while, including up there in Cairns for a little bit. And then went on to continue my marine science journey, doing honours over in Perth, looking at seaweed sensitivity to marine heat waves and temperature stress. And then went on and did a whole bunch of research and scientific diving for a couple of years throughout tropical waters. And then was just using the camera lots with my research and doing a little bit of documentation of what I'm doing. And it was on those research expeditions that we did, like throughout the Indo-Pacific. We often had film crews join us, and I was like, I just really love what these guys are doing, and kept asking questions, kept practicing and learning, and essentially wanted to steer in that direction. So did a lot of short productions, making videos, and eventually it turned into a bit of paid work. But what I realised is that if I'm going to be making these educational films, I felt like I really needed to get some more qualifications within that education space. So got my graduate diploma in education, did a bit of work in schools, and at the same time just continued making films and still diving, doing underwater work. And then in the last probably 5 to 10 years, I've brought together those different fields of the education, the marine science and filmmaking. And that's basically what I do on a day-to-day basis now with the Great Southern Reef Foundation.
We've been hearing a bit on our show, science is key, but to shift hearts and minds and create change, we need creatives and educators to help get the message out there. So you're pretty much exemplifying that. So it's pretty inspiring. So let's talk about the Great Southern Reef. Although the majority of Australians live along the southern coastline of Australia, some of them may not even be aware that just off the coast is this incredible 8,000 kilometre long ecosystem called the Great Southern Reef. So can you give us a bit of an intro? What is the Great Southern Reef and what's so special about it?
Well, when most people think about reefs, they think of course, coral reefs. And down south, we do have lots of these rocky reef systems. And it's the kelp, the seaweeds that provide the habitat, a bit like the corals do up there, for a whole range of different species, but they need that rocky reef structure in order to be able to attach to and grow from. So across our southern coast of Australia, we have got more seaweed species than anywhere else in the world, so it's incredibly diverse.
Wow.
And a lot of these are actually unique to Australia, not found anywhere else in the world. And so, seaweeds are often overlooked and underappreciated, but when you're thinking about diversity and endemism, we are just sitting on an absolute treasure trove here in Australia. So there's one species of seaweed in particular called golden kelp, Aquonia radiata, which essentially is found across that whole 8,000 kilometre distribution of the Great Southern Reef. And it's a big, beautiful, laminarian kelp seaweed. So it forms habitat, and its presence means that other seaweeds can grow, other organisms can thrive in that environment too. So that is what the scientists have outlined as essentially the geographical distribution of the Great Southern Reef.
Right.
And you do have that golden kelp growing all the way up to essentially the most northernmost tip of New South Wales, and all the way around down south, around Tassie, all the way across to Western Australia, and even north of Perth up to the Kalbarri area up there. So it's very extensive.
Is that an endemic kelp to Australia, did you say, or can that be found elsewhere?
It's actually also found elsewhere. In New Zealand. They've got a lot of it as well. So that's the main habitat former, but there's a lot of other fucoid seaweeds that form the habitat as well. So essentially, the Great Southern Reef is our rocky reef system. So when it transitions from the corals to the seaweeds habitat, and we've just got all of these beautiful, limestone reefs, granite reefs, all sorts of, diverse seaweeds that grow on there. And then, of course, there's all of the beautiful organisms that live in amongst these kelp forests, like, of course, your sea dragons, giant cuttlefish, Australian sea lions. The list is just endless. But speaking of the endemism, species found nowhere else, that's where the Great Southern Reef really shines. So looking across all sorts of different taxa, the Great Southern Reef has just got, up to 70% of the species are actually found nowhere else. So if you compare that to the Great Barrier Reef, for example, there's only maybe a couple of percent of endemic.
We just missed that number. What percentage of endemic?
Up to 70%.
Wow, 70%.
Yes.
Crikey.
Well,
That's impressive.
It is like one of the furthest coastlines from anywhere.
That's right. Next stop, Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because of its long geographical isolation from the rest of the world, and also the stable climatic conditions for deep time, it's allowed these animals to evolve and adapt independently, and that's what's given birth to just all of these really incredible and unique creatures. So we do get people from all over the world come down here to Southern Australia, particularly really experienced underwater photographers who have been everywhere. They've captured photos of everything, and there's certain critters that are on their bucket list because, the only place to find them is down, across the Great Southern Reef.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm swimming in an ocean of
me too.
waving seaweed right now. It's all around me. I'm immersed. I can just imagine it. So, Stefan, when we talk about the Great Barrier Reef, obviously we're talking about coral as the building blocks of the reef, but for the Great Southern Reef, that habitat foundation is the seaweed. And, I've walked on a lot of beaches down south, and when seaweed washes up on the beach, it doesn't look like much. It's brown and it smells. So I feel like many people who haven't jumped in the water and swam with it might not be as excited and appreciative about seaweed as we should be. So why is seaweed so important?
I think you're right there, Tanya. Most people associate seaweed with what washes up on the beach, and they don't understand just its importance to the broader ecosystem as the foundation species. Because the seaweed's there, all the other species are able to exist. So it drives that primary production of the system, and many species will eat some of the seaweed. Some will need it to be able to lay their eggs. And even within the holdfast itself of seaweed, there's been studies that show over 100 species of different organisms living within a single holdfast. Wow. So they really help to support that biodiversity.
The word holdfast sounds like something out of Game of Thrones. Is that what you call a collective noun for a group of seaweeds?
The holdfast is what attaches the seaweed onto that reef structure.
Okay.
So it, I guess, looks like a little bit like a claw. It's able to then hold in some cases, seaweeds, in terms of the giant kelp, they can be tens of meters tall. So it needs to be pretty strong, and in some cases, very swelly, high energy environments. So you got to think this is gripping onto a rock and supporting the weight of all that seaweed. So they've got to be really strong to be able to.
And also you've got speaking on behalf of the sharks, as I always do, our sharks attach their eggs to the seaweed as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's just so important.
Yeah. So the seaweeds, in your shallower reef system, so down to about 30 or even 40 metres or so, in places where there's clearer water, you've still got some of that kelp growing. But what's quite remarkable with the Great Southern Reef is those deeper water habitats too, is we've got these really incredible sponge garden ecosystems. So all of your filter feeding invertebrates, and they kind of start around that 30 to 40 metre range and just keeps going down. So these are some of the most understudied ecosystems in Australia. And when, as you guys know, as divers, like, you can't really spend much time down past 30.
Yeah.
But when you do get down there, it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
Particularly some of these reefs off SA and Tassie that, we've gone down 40, 50 metres or so. It's just mind-blowing, the diversity that's down there. And with a lot of those organisms, they're just, a lot of the sponges, for example, they don't even have names. They haven't really even been classified by science. So there's a lot that we still don't know about the Great Southern Reef, particularly in those deeper waters too.
Wow, I'm surrounded by all different coloured sponges right now. I'm swimming in an alien garden.
Yeah, I'm sitting on the bottom at 50 metres at the moment, looking through all the kelp and the fish. I've drifted off.
It's magical.
Yeah. It's pretty special down there in those deeper water reefs, and that's what really excites me to do more of in the future as well.
Yeah, it's getting very expensive, us interviewing all these people, Brett, because I've just added more places to the bucket list.
Yeah, I know. We're going to need a year-funded trip just to go and visit all of our guest speakers and sample their areas.
Luckily, we can visit them in our imaginations.
That's right.
So, Stefan, I understand you are on your way to dive with an aggregation of particularly iconic animals today. Can you tell us where you're going and what's happening there?
That's right. It's an exciting time of the year because every winter, thousands of giant Australian cuttlefish move to this one little spot in Whaler at the top of the Spencer Gulf.
Yep.
And they move up there to mate with each other and then lay their eggs. So this is something that's been observed for a couple of decades now, and quite reliably every year around this time at the end of May, they start arriving. And straight after this phone call, I'm going to be heading up there and going to be starting a bit of filming for a production that I'm working on to document what's going on over this winter.
Wow.
So, it's a really exciting spectacle. It's been featured on Blue Planet 2. It's been in a number of documentaries and that sort of thing. But it's really quite accessible. It's in shallow water. You don't need to be a scuba diver. You can be a snorkeler. Jump in off the rocks there, straight off the shore, and within 1 to 2 metres of water straight away, you've just got thousands of these crazy alien-looking animals.
Oh, they're just one of my favourite animals to film. Aren't they amazing? They're so cheeky too.
Yeah, there's a lot of really crazy behaviours going on at the aggregation. There's most of the males are trying to compete with each other to mate with the females. So the larger ones will physically be bumping each other out and putting on these big light shows and polarized displays on the side of their bodies.
Wow.
But what's really cool with some of the smaller males is they actually pretend to be a female and sneak up close to the other females and feel threatened, and then they'll do what's called a sneak mate on them.
Oh, have a go at them.
Yeah. Actually has been proven to be quite a successful way of mating with the females. So even if you're not the biggest and strongest cuttlefish, you've still got a chance.
Oh,
amazing.
Yeah, their light shows that they put on is just incredible, isn't it? You could just sit there and stare at them for hours.
Yeah, you never get sick of being around those cuttlefish. And I think there's a lot of behaviours too there. We've just got no idea what exactly is going on. Even though they've been quite well documented, there's still, I think, a lot to be understood.
I can foresee an episode just about cuttlefish at some point in the future.
Add it to the list.
But for today, let's talk about another incredible animal that lives on the Great Southern Reef. Well, I guess we don't have time to look at all of them today, but another one which stands out for me is the leafy sea dragon, because people travel all the way to South Australia, especially to look for leafy sea dragons. For any listeners who might not be familiar, Stefan, can you tell us what is a leafy sea dragon and what's special about them?
Well, sea dragons are one of my favourite animals for sure. They're just so iconic. The marine emblem of South Australia, the leafy ones. You got the leafy and weedies. The leafy sea dragons essentially have got these leaf-like appendages that blend in really, really well to the seaweed. And the weedy sea dragons are a little bit different in the way that they're like coloration and shape, and that varies a lot depending on the location that they're in as well. But they're related to seahorses. They're in the cygnathids family. So essentially they are similar to seahorses in some ways, but what's different is that rather than having that tail that, you know, that they attach to some seaweed or attached to something, they're actually free floating and free swimming in the water. And they are just so incredible at camouflage, particularly the leafy sea dragons. When you're showing people them for the first time, it usually takes people quite some time to be able to adjust and identify the animal from the habitat.
Yeah.
You could be like pointing right at it and they just haven't quite registered that there's something else there. And that moment when it switches and they click and they see sort of that that's the snout or that's the eye, and then it sort of pops out, a bit like a magic eye sort of thing. Wow. But then you can see them light up and and people get genuinely really excited about it.
Wow.
I reckon I've shown at least 100 people their first ever leafy sea dragon through tours and guiding, and it never gets old, like seeing those reactions. And people, as you said, come from all over the world to see them. The sea dragons themselves they're quite vulnerable in the sense that they can't really swim away from predators, although there's no actual predators of them, but they can't really swim very much away from people or threats. So if their habitat is under threat, and let's say the seaweed and the seagrass dies around them, then they're left exposed and vulnerable. So they're really habitat dependent in that sense, and they don't really move too far away, or they don't have the ability to. Yeah. A bit like seahorses, they also share the parental responsibilities across to the male carries the eggs, which is quite cool.
Yeah, we've got a big male at work at the moment that's over it. Looks like he's got a giant avocado seed attached to his belly, and he looks at me every day and goes, "Oh, get these things out of me." He's huge.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
And they are still like pretty quite rare across the Great Southern Reef, but there's some really interesting citizen science projects that have been documenting populations for some time now. And bit like what's been done, with whale sharks and manta rays and many other species now, there are these programs that citizen scientists can take photos of the dragons, and using facial recognition software and tracking the markings particularly on their faces, we're able to track the same dragons and add them into a database and be able to make estimates of population sizes and movements and that kind of thing. So, there's a lot of exciting work that's been done on them too.
Talk about technology nowadays. You can do facial recognition technology on a seahorse. And I mean, we're looking at them thinking they all look the same. Yeah. And they're thinking the same of us.
That's right.
Just get one to open your iPhone for you. And see.
Yeah.
So we've spent the first half of the show learning all about the Great Southern Reef and some of the amazing animals that live there, some of the amazing dive sites you can visit, some of the things you can see. And now we're going to look at some of the threats and what we can do to help protect it. So, Stefan, can you tell us a bit about the Great Southern Reef Foundation? Why has this foundation been set up and what are its goals?
Sure thing. Well, the Great Southern Reef Foundation, our mission is to be a voice for our kelp forests and provide a vision for their ongoing management and safeguarding them for future generations and encouraging stewardship of our Great Southern Reef too. So we do that through community, education and science. These are our main pillars for our work. And within those, we have been working on a number of different initiatives, but a lot of it's based around the science communication and visual storytelling to help people connect with what a lot of people don't get to see on a day-to-day basis, because, a lot of people across the Great Southern Reef, they might interact with it without even knowing it, but not that many people actually get in and under the water to see what's down there. So that's where the role of underwater videography and storytelling comes in too. So the Great Southern Reef itself was only actually officially named, I guess, as an entity about 10 years ago. And it was proposed through a research paper by Dr. Scott Bennett, Thomas Wernberg and other colleagues, researchers that felt that too long the interconnected reef system has been overlooked and it needs an identity that people can connect with. And in that original paper, which was published in a pretty major journal and has since been cited hundreds of times, that was the first time that the Great Southern Reef was proposed and put out there, and also evaluated in terms of its economic and cultural value too. And since that, just like a lot of things in the news will get a bit of media attention, like, oh, Great Southern Reef is a thing, but what it really required is ongoing and consistent communication to be able to really embed that identity in Aussie culture, which is what we've been trying to do. So our work started probably about 6 or 7 years ago through the foundation to be able to document stories of people across the reef, whether they be fishers, surfers, divers, just passionate ocean lovers, people from a variety of different backgrounds, including First Nations connections. It's a big part of what we try and promote too, with our storytelling, and getting them to share their stories so we can then get more people to understand what they're talking about and connect and relate to it too. So that formed the basis of some of the original educational resources that we created to get into schools, because it was very clear that there's a lot of schools that down southern Australia are learning about tropical reef species and coral reefs, which is great. It's awesome to learn about that, but it's equally as, or arguably more important, to also learn about the marine species that are in your backyard too.
That's right.
And it became really clear too that if a teacher really does want to teach about kelp forests, the examples that they may find with resources are like a Californian kelp forest with otters in there and things like that. So there was, and there still really is, a big need for more resources around the Great Southern Reef. And that's a big part of what we've been trying to achieve too, alongside the films that we make and also the community initiatives like film festivals, screening events, and also collaborating with artists to help share the beauty of what we've got on our southern doorstep.
That's incredible, and it's a theme we've had on many episodes about the importance of storytelling and education, because you can have scientists writing papers till the cows come home, but if the ordinary public and the politicians aren't aware, if they're not seeing these moving and powerful images and videos and these educational resources, then nothing's really going to change. Yeah. So that's why it's amazing you as a scientist have also gone into storytelling and high school education and, just really taking the message out there. And I think that's a really important job that the Great Southern Reef Foundation is doing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the threats to the Great Southern Reef, starting with this devastating algal bloom outbreak that's occurring as we speak. It's been going on for a few weeks. But Stefan, for any listeners who might not be across it, can you explain what this algal bloom outbreak is and what impact it's having down near you?
Sure, Tanya. Yeah, it's really devastating. It actually started a couple of months ago when the first signs of marine life washing up on the shores near, on the Fleurieu Peninsula, like around near Victor Harbour kind of way. And at that stage, it was just quite localised and concentrated. It was still really alarming, and people were obviously concerned. Some of the first to raise the alarm were also surfers that were coming out of the water coughing and with skin irritation and red eyes, and they're like, there's obviously something wrong in the water. Wow. And so over the course of the last 2 months, things have just escalated and continued to get worse. It surfaced within not very long after that first incident of the fish washing up that it was due to an algae species called Karenia, and essentially this species is found all over the world, and if you've got the right conditions it can bloom out, and it's toxic to fish. Basically will cause them to suffocate and can cause like internal hemorrhaging, and it's not just a few fish or invertebrate species that have suffered is basically non-discriminatory. Almost every species that you can think of has been affected, right from tiny little cockles and shellfish up to our biggest, great white sharks. And what's happened over the ongoing last couple of months is the bloom spread, and it has essentially engulfed the entire north coast of the Kangaroo Island and the whole southern coast of York Peninsula. So huge area affected. The visual signs of it is discoloured water and also froth and foam. And then, of course, all of the dead marine life washing up on the coast. So it's been really quite sad for anyone that lives on the coast that has seen it firsthand. And I think it's hard for people to recognise just the sheer scale of not just geographically how far it's spread, but in terms of the amount of species that have been affected too. And there's been now recorded through a citizen science tracking through just beach wash-ups, over 265 species that have been found dead and washed up.
Oh, God. It's just inconceivable, isn't it?
Yeah, some of those, like southern fiddler rays, for example, beautiful stingrays. There's been hundreds of individuals that have been washed up. So it's taken a massive toll on South Australia's marine life.
It's just mind-boggling to think of what impact that could have on the local population. I looked up the size of Kangaroo Island. It's more than 4,000 square kilometres, and the bloom is said to be bigger than that. So that's a whole area just could be wiped out. It's really sad.
Yeah.
It's huge, and what was alarming for me when even those first fish started washing up is they weren't just shallow reef species too. There were deeper ones too that you'd think it would be a bit safer down a bit deeper there. Surprising to see them washing up. And there's been reports that the bloom has been affecting down to 20 metres. So
wow.
It's not just that sort of surface area figure, but also the depth as well. So,
geez, it's covering everything, isn't it?
Yeah. And the cause of it, sure, many of the listeners are like, well, what's caused it? We've had a marine heatwave here in South Australia, and the waters, particularly in Gulf St Vincent, have been over 2 degrees warmer than what you'd expect for extended periods, a couple of months.
Yeah.
We've also had these really calm conditions, so very low winds for extended periods. There's been basically next to no rain here in about 6 months or so as well. But that just gives you an idea. There's been none of these big storm fronts that we'd usually expect this time of year that helps stir things up.
Yeah.
And our gulfs are quite shallow, so they're more or less than 30 metres deep throughout quite a big area. So if there's no mixing with the deeper Southern Ocean, water can really start heating up, and it's been creating great conditions for algae to bloom, particularly when there's high nutrients. So that's the other factor here that's been contributing to the bloom, is the fact that there's been higher than average nutrients in the water. And there's a couple of suggested causes from that. A few years ago, there were big floods across eastern Australia and pushed out a lot of nutrient-rich water out the Murray mouth. And those nutrients have, of course, sticked around in the system. So that's been one suggestion. And the other is the upwelling that we get in southeast and South Australia too, which has been, the upwelling's great, provides nutrients for our kelp forests and, attracts a lot of large megafauna and filter feeding animals. But yeah, it has also been higher than average over this last summer. And so you've just got the high nutrients, warm water, still conditions, and
just the perfect storm.
Yeah, exactly.
The perfect lack of storms.
And there's that connection again, isn't it? It's that rising temperature in our ocean again.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about climate change on our show. We know that the sea temperatures across the entire world are at record highs. More than 80% of coral reefs worldwide are being exposed to bleaching level temperatures. In more than 82 countries are experiencing coral bleaching. We've talked about coral bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef this year. There's been coral bleaching on Ningaloo Reef in Western Australia. So just connect that up around the bottom. And now we're seeing these hot sea temperatures causing algal blooms. It's like Stefan said, drought is contributing former floods and then high sea surface temperatures. So it's kind of not unexpected. There was going to be some impact of warm sea temperatures everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Great Southern Reef, actually, we've got a couple of warming hotspots globally where these areas are those couple of degrees higher than global averages. And it's not South Australia, actually. It's on the east coast with that strengthening East Australian current and the west coast. And so there was a big marine heatwave event in 2011 in Western Australia, which caused some pretty significant widespread fish deaths and abalone and rock lobster and massive shifts in species distributions. So it is something that we've seen happen before in Western Australia. It was absolutely devastating. And then also on our east coast, and that warmer water that's pushing down has been causing a whole bunch of impacts to particularly our giant kelp down in Tasmania. Some of your listeners might not know that over 95% of the giant kelp in Tasmania has disappeared in the last couple of decades due to climate change and those warming waters. So there's not much left of the giant kelp macrocystis down there. And then we're also getting more warmer species pushing down further south, and a phenomenon that's called tropicalization of our temperate reefs.
Right.
So herbivorous grazers moving down and smashing more seaweed than what the system can tolerate, and that causes changes in the overall composition of species on those reefs and particularly reduced habitat too.
So what's the normal temperature? What would be an acceptable temperature or highest tolerance that area can take before the rising of 2 degrees? What are we looking at?
Are you talking about here in South Australia?
Yeah, where the algal bloom is.
The thing is, the water does heat up in the Gulf to up to about 23 degrees over the summer, but it doesn't stay that warm for too long. And it's, the flushing of it. So I couldn't give you some specific numbers, unfortunately.
No, that's right.
Yeah, it's just been that extended duration and lack of mixing of those water conditions. But usually by now, it would have been dropping down to around, you'd expect it to be about 17 or so, but was close to that 20 still for quite some time, which is just too warm.
I know this is personal and close for you because you've been diving in that water in that area for years, and then you've been for a dive recently in one of those incredible dive sites that has now been impacted. And so for those who haven't seen it, can you describe the scene that you encountered on that dive underwater during the algal bloom?
Yeah, there's a spot called E12 Jetty. It's one of my favourite dive sites in the world, and I have dived quite a few places. And what's great about it is just you never know what you might see there, particularly on a night dive. It's just mind-blowing. This jetty is over 100 years old, so these structures have been down there for so long, just over time accumulating different sorts of growth on all of the pylons. And it's in a really unique location geographically too, because you're getting species coming from all over the place and settling in there. It's a breeding habitat for many species too, and particularly you get a lot of octopus and little baby cuttlefish and all sorts of crazy marine life there. So absolutely loved going there, but it was absolutely devastating to revisit that site a bit over a week ago. I knew that the waters around there had been getting impacted by the bloom, and I was prepared for it to not look great, but as soon as I got down there, the water was really, really dark green. It was pretty low vis, it was maybe a couple of metres, and it didn't really feel that welcoming, but like, okay, we've got to have a look what's happening down there. And all of these once previously beautifully colourful, diverse pylons were just essentially breaking down. As filter feeders, they were filtering that toxic algae species, and it was causing them to die. And the pylons were just turned from colourful diversity to just, it looked like they were just covered in dirt, but it was just sediment and filamentous algae and broken down cells. So at the base of those pylons too, you've just got dead fish, dead octopus, things that are dying. There was very few signs of actual living marine life there. And so captured footage of that, and if people are interested to see the before and afters, or actually anything that we've been talking about today, is, just check out the @Great Southern Reef across socials, and we've got a lot of articles and videos showing what's happening.
Is there any way of knowing the long-term impact of this bloom? Can you predict what will happen with those marine life populations and with the ecosystem that's been impacted?
We're not going to know for quite some time exactly the full extent of what this event will have caused in terms of the devastation on marine life long term. Definitely what I've captured there was a habitat at Edithburgh that is going to take years and years to get back to anything what it once used to look like, and it may never recover to what it did used to look like. What I'm concerned about is the kelp and the seagrass meadows too. Like, there's no one looking underwater of the impacts at the moment, and that's what's concerning. We really don't know. We're only seeing the signs of things that are washing up on the beach, and so there's the potential to be much greater devastation.
You're just seeing the tip of the iceberg when you walk on the beach and see all the animals washing up, but what about all the ones that aren't washing up? That's
the perfect analogy for it. And then so with some of our species, like sadly one of my favourites, the southern blue devil, which individuals can live above 50 years of age, and they're very slow growing, slow to reproduce. They have also been washing up, same with harlequin fish, really long-lived species that can live over 45 years. The sea dragons, it's right in their breeding cycle. So many of the reproductive adults have washed up, and the numbers of sea dragons is really concerning. One guy picked up over 50 dragons across an 8-kilometre line just a week ago down the bottom of York Peninsula. And like these dragons, you are lucky if you see one on a dive.
Yeah, that's right.
It's an incredible dive if you see multiple dragons, and it's quite rare. But to have 50 washed up on a stretch of coastline is really alarming, and
it's just heartbreaking is what it is, isn't it? It's just awful.
It is. Yeah, devastating is the most common response that people are having, what's going on. But
especially when you described how beautiful but helpless they are. Like, they can't swim fast to get away from an algal bloom. They're
just so vulnerable.
They've lived for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years by blending into their surroundings, and now they can't escape.
And I guess also the other thing that's unknown is, if we're not seeing them washed up on the beach, the flow-on effect from this. So the animals that are having that entering their blood system that don't succumb to it, how far down that breeding cycle is that going to affect? You know, is that going to affect them when they breed and their babies and so on and so forth?
That's right. We honestly just do not know the full extent of the impacts, and that's why we're really calling for more research and funding to do that research to better understand what's going on, and hopefully we can learn something from what's happened here, but we've got to be doing the research to be able to figure that out.
So important to note for those who have an interest in visiting South Australia's Great Southern Reef, although this algal bloom is huge, it's important to remember that the South Australian coastline is huge. So for anyone who is interested in coming to see some of those wonders, is there still cool stuff to see? Is there still places people can go?
Yeah, where I'm heading right now this afternoon to that giant cuttlefish aggregation, and what it seems to be most of that Spencer Gulf is so far not impacted by the algal bloom, that we just don't know what's going to happen. We really hope that things aren't impacted there. It would be absolutely devastating if the cuttlefish aggregation has been affected. But the latest I've heard just a few days ago, they've started rocking up in their hundreds, and the ecosystem's looking really healthy there. So if you're going to go to one thing, and this aggregation happens for a couple of months, so if you're interested in a trip to South Australia, I'd be going straight there. It's an internationally renowned marine life event.
Looking at my flights now.
I just cannot tell you the level of jealousy I have right now, knowing that you're going to go and swim with cuttlefish this afternoon, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you did tell me that there's still a tour operator taking people to see the sea dragons, just in a different spot outside of the algal bloom. So very important to support those efforts that are still there for people to see and appreciate the Great Southern Reef, I guess.
Yes, exactly. So there's one dive site that's quite well known for its dragons, Rapid Bay Jetty. There are still tours going out there. The marine life doesn't seem to have been affected there at that spot, so we're just hoping it stays that way too.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about the impact on marine life, but You also mentioned that surfers and swimmers can't go in the water, which is affected because it can cause rashes. And I mean, you obviously took a risk and went diving on that jetty, and I guess you had a wetsuit on, so you told me that you didn't get much of an impact, but it's impacting our very way of life when people can't go for a swim at the beach and people can't go fishing because they don't want to eat the impacted fish. So that's a really big personal, it's getting personal when Aussies can't go to the beach. That's just personal, you know?
That's not right. That's not cricket.
Exactly.
Sometimes we don't realise the value of things until they're taken away from us.
Yep.
And there's such a intrinsic value for Aussies to be able to just go down to the beach and be around a nice, clean environment, breathe the fresh air, jump in that cool, fresh water. And for me, it's a real reset. If I'm getting stressed out from video editing or emails or just things are getting a bit too much, I go for a swim or a dive and it's just that complete reset.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are feeling frustrated because they don't feel like they can do that at the moment. And that is a price that we're paying for our mental health as well.
Yeah.
So the impacts are a lot more broader than just the marine life.
There's
also industries that depend on the healthy ocean here, and a number of the oyster farmers, they have had to close down. They're unable to sell the oysters, but all of their oyster stock may die. It's unclear the full extent of the impacts. There are many fisheries that rely on the healthy fish. There's also a lot of recreational fishers that love going out, catching a small bag of fish to feed their family. There's very few people going out fishing, and they're concerned that even if they do catch fish, like, are they safe to eat? So, yeah, we're still, as you said, tip of the iceberg, really understand the full extent of what's been happening.
Right. So now I suppose there are things being done and things that can be done to research what's happening with this algal bloom, find out how extensive it is and what we can do to be more ready for the climate future that is coming. And there's things that people can do to help you and get involved. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So aside from people on the ground here being able to document what's happening and add that to iNaturalist, we are encouraging people to fill out a survey that is getting people to express their concern, and we're going to be having conversations with state and federal politicians to just share some figures and anecdotal evidence from people about why they want to see some actions. And the sort of things people are asking for is, of course, more stronger climate action. But from our foundation's perspective too, one thing we've been advocating for quite some time is enhanced funding for the Great Southern Reef. So over the last couple of decades, the Great Southern Reef has received just 1% of the funding of coral reefs in Australia. And we are calling for an integrated, coordinated monitoring system to be able to help us better understand the impacts of marine heat waves across the Great Southern Reef and get a better baseline of the biodiversity and how it may be affected as well. So, individuals can fill out that survey and help share their voice. There's also a webinar that's happening on May 28th, and there's a link at the bottom of our recent article, a comprehensive article about what's happening with the algal bloom, that people can join if they want to learn a bit more about what's going on. And of course, there's also a petition people can sign up with Divers for Climate to help advocate for stronger climate policies as well. So there's a few things people can do.
Do you think it's time that the GSR has the same voice as the GBR? Do you think that this is going to be the catalyst that we recognise the GSR as being as important as the Great Barrier Reef, the Great Southern Reef? Do you think it's time now that this should be highlighted?
Quite a long time. So that's what we've been advocating for quite a while. But the tricky thing is that we do still have a long way to go. We're starting to make traction with the underwater photography community, people just like getting around the Great Southern Reef. The scientific community, it's being cited in a lot of papers and it's been more widely accepted in marine research and ocean literacy. But we've got to get out to people that are not just already in this ocean echo chamber, and we've still got a hell of a long way to go. And that's where my big motivation for getting this into schools is.
Yes.
And so if kids grow up learning about the Great Southern Reef and how special it is and all the beautiful, unique marine life on their doorstep, then it just becomes part of who they are, and naturally they're going to want to look after it as well. So part of our long-term goal for sure.
Absolutely.
Massive advocate for that.
Yeah, it's so important. So let's talk about your film White Rock. We've touched on how climate change is causing warmer water currents to bring species such as the kelp-eating sea urchin down into the Great Southern Reef, and it's causing these outbreaks and it's eating all the kelp. So yeah, tell us a bit more about that film and what is the Great Southern Reef Foundation doing around that?
Yeah, the long-spine urchins are somewhat analogous to the crown-of-thorns starfish, which probably a lot of your listeners are quite familiar with. And they don't recognise that there's also similar echinoderm that's actually smashing the kelp forest down along the east coast of South Australia and particularly hitting Tasmania really hard. So there's about 2,000 kilometres of coastline that's been affected by sea urchins. The long-spine urchin is native to New South Wales, and that's an important point to make, is that it's not an invasive species. It is extending its range into areas that it hasn't existed previously, and it's causing big changes in the ecosystem. So what it's doing is it's churning the dense, beautiful kelp forest into what we call urchin barrens. And an urchin barren is when the urchins have reproduced and exist in really large numbers, and they're eating out all of the seaweed. So they scrape it back to that rocky substrate that the kelps attach onto and the seaweeds attach onto, and what's left is just basically the title of the film, White Rock, because they've eaten everything away. No more seaweed there, and then that's changed from what previously was a high biodiversity, high productivity reef into a low biodiversity, low productivity system. And there's tens of millions of these urchins, particularly affecting the east coast of Tasmania, the east coast of Victoria and southern New South Wales. And numbers have been increasing. And I guess unlike the crown-of-thorns starfish, the great thing about these sea urchins is there is something that we can do about it, because they've got value in the urchin roe. It's a highly prized seafood around the world, and it does have the potential to be a profitable industry. People love eating sea urchins around the world, but not so much in Australia yet. So part of the messaging in this film is not just showing that, there's all these urchins, there's a big imbalance and there's a problem, but there's things that people can do. And one of those things is to eat an urchin and promote the sustainable consumption of sea urchins in Australia too, and help that industry out.
Wow, yeah, Brett and I both saw the film at the Ocean Film Festival recently and really enjoyed it. Have you eaten any sea urchins, Stefan?
I have now. As of a few years ago, I'd never tried it. And through my work with filming, I tried it a few years ago and could realise the potential with it. And then over the last few weeks, we've been touring White Rock across the country as part of our emergency tour, running community screenings.
Wait. Emergency?
Yeah.
Oh, stop it. Love it.
And we've been not only just showing the film, but hosting a Q&A panel discussion and serving up sea urchins, collaborating with chefs to put it on in a variety of different ways. And I tell you what, Tanya, it is really delicious. And I would encourage anyone that's never tried it before to give it a go, particularly that fresh, straight out of the ocean roe that's at the right time of year, which is around now. It's just absolutely delicious. It's like a umami, buttery, creamy, delicate mouthful of flavour.
Chuck another urchin on the barbie, mate.
Oh, have a go. Yeah, that's the new slogan. Let's do that.
Yeah.
The hashtag's Eat an Urchin, and we're just getting more people to try it out, and we're also encouraging more chefs to experiment with it, get it on the menus in their restaurants.
Yep. And this is the silver lining, isn't it? The only silver lining to this is that those pests can be sold off and eaten. I mean, if we'd had the ability to do that with the crown-of-thorns sea star 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had the issue.
So in a lot of places around the world, Brett, they've actually overfished the sea urchins because they love them so much. So we've got the opposite problem. Not pulling enough out. So a big part of the challenge here is turning the urchins that are in there into that self-sustaining industry, because it's very costly to go out, collect the urchins and particularly process them. And there was a Senate inquiry into invasive species 2 years ago, and the federal government were recommended to urgently invest in a dedicated urchin task force to help combat the issue
conduct more research, incentivise the industry, create jobs, and essentially turn what this is a crisis into an opportunity for Australia. But since that recommendation was passed down, there's been absolutely nothing from our leaders, and that was the main driving force of motivation towards making this film, is to get people to help put that pressure on our leaders that we need that funding to help catalyse this industry and to help better combat what's happening with our kelp forests and the urchins, because the longer we delay, the worse it gets. Ultimately, the more expensive it's going to be in the future to sort it out. So we'd love our leaders to be a bit more proactive with our Great Southern Reef, and we need to invest in it. So by watching the film and filling out the survey at the end, we're collecting people's responses, and we now have over 2,000 of those that we are using to help with conversations with policymakers, politicians, to show that people care about what's going on. And over 99% of people that have seen the film want that funding and the action on the sea urchins. So with a bit of additional pressure and ongoing support, hopefully we can get that much needed federal funding for the urchin task force. So now that we've finished our tour, we're also encouraging people across the country to be able to host their own screening events. And people can get in touch and get a community screening pack. We can give you the high-res version of the film, promo materials, a facilitator guide, and we can get people to host their own screenings and see the film and continue the momentum around White Rock. And we'd love you to get in touch if you want to host one of those events.
Any listeners out there want to take action, either to hold a documentary screening or to support the Great Southern Reef Foundation in any way, where can they head to find out more?
So greatsouthernreef.com or Great Southern Reef on socials. You'll be able to find us there.
Awesome.
Amazing. Stefan Andrews, co-founder and director of education at the Great Southern Reef Foundation. It's been amazing having you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, buddy.
Really appreciate your interest. It's been great chatting with you guys. And yeah, hopefully we can do it again sometime.
I will have you back. And try not to have too much fun this afternoon with those cuttlefish, all right?
I just can't wait to get in the water.
Yeah, I know.
All right then, get going.
Off you go then.
Cheers, guys.
See you, buddy.
Appreciate it.
And thanks to you, all our listeners, for joining us on Word on the Reef. I'm Tanya Murphy, and my co-host is Brett Goodban, and we'll be back next Friday at 10 a.m. with more awesome marine science adventures. So be sure to tune into Cairns FM 89.1 to listen to the show live and text in your questions. You can also follow us on Instagram at instagram.com/wordonthereefpodcast. That's all for this week.
Yep. Have a fantastic week, folks. See you next week.
Best fishes.
Bye.
Bye.